Hi everyone, it's Jay Egersdorff here talking about Game Week 31 of the Fantasy Premier League. I'm pretty pleased Game Week 30 is beyond us. I know from all the people that reached out to me on Twitter, there were a lot of managers that had a really wretched run of luck over that game week. I myself got a mere 39 points, and that's given me a red arrow to 2,778th overall. Still not bad, but certainly not where I'd hoped I'd be at this part of the season, considering I was really up high in the top couple of hundred earlier in the campaign. I knew it would be a tricky game week in Game Week 30 because of the Liverpool and the Man United game. I've got 3 Liverpool attackers and I've got De Gea, so straight away you pretty much know that's going to cancel itself out. Kane, of course, got injured, which was a real surprise and obviously really disappointing. And things like the Chelsea last-minute conceding of a goal meant that players like Alonso, who are normally really reliable for points, he only chipped in with 2 points last week. So it's a game week that I really want to forget, and I'm probably sure a lot of the managers out there will do too. Anybody who had Son and or Mahrez, well played. Those guys are really on form right now, but not much use to you as we head into a unusual situation in Game Week 31, whereby we've not got many teams playing, and we really need to be careful and clever here how we set ourselves up for this game week. In my view, everybody needs to relax. This Game Week 31 is one where you shouldn't be chasing points. I don't think you should be taking too many points hits. If you don't have many players from the teams that are playing in your team already, then I'd probably not panic too much. And that's because I don't feel that the teams involved in this game week are good enough for you to predict confidently that there's going to be a return, a points return for your investment of taking a -4. So basically, it's a gamble. If you're going to take points hits in this game week, then it may come off. It's got a good chance that it's going to cost you points, and that's definitely something that you don't want to be doing at this stage of the season, or at any stage for that matter. I think if you're looking at doing a free hit for this game week, again, I wouldn't bother. I don't think there's the quality there for you to confidently predict where you might get some lucrative returns. I think that free hit might be more valuable to you later on, maybe in a double game week where you could fill your team up with players that are playing twice from some of the better teams in the league, or likewise there may be some doubles further on, particularly around game week 35, where it's unlikely that the games moved for the FA Cup will be moved to the following game week. It's likely they'll move to later on in the season, so I probably wouldn't play the free hit this time round. In terms of the wild card, maybe you'd look at doing that the following game week, in Game Week 32, particularly if you've got quite a lot of players maybe from Huddersfield or Bournemouth or Stoke that you don't want hanging around your team. That could be a good strategy, but remember that we might not know when the double game weeks are by the time you press go on that wild card. So it could be an idea still to cling on to it, but I certainly don't think a wild card in 32 is a bad strategy from the position that we're in now. Do you need a full team for Game Week 31? I don't think you do, but I do think there is one thing you need, and that's 3 Liverpool players. That Liverpool fixture at home to Watford is the fixture that we can most confidently predict is going to result in a probable home win. You would expect Liverpool to score in that game. You'd expect Liverpool to probably win the game, and therefore that should result in points from an FPL perspective. I myself have got what I've called the Anfield Power Trio, so that's the 3 of Mane, Firmino and Salah. I think your other options there might be looking at either Van Dijk, Robertson, or if you need a goalie, maybe Karius. He's playing quite well at the minute, but I do like the look of that attacking front 3 in terms of a points return. These guys are on form. Liverpool score a lot of goals. Watford tend to ship quite a lot of goals. So you put the two together, and that's a pretty good mix in my opinion. I think it's tricky to predict in Game Week 31 the outcome of the other matches. So we've got Stoke, Everton, Bournemouth, West Brom and Huddersfield Palace. And that's because there's teams in there that are all fighting for relegation. So when we get towards the end of the season, history tells us and research tells us that teams towards the bottom suddenly start producing results that you wouldn't have otherwise expected at other points of the season. And that's a knock-on effect of them really fighting for their lives and raising their level of performance to allow them to beat teams that you might not ordinarily expect them to beat. So logic would suggest that two relegation-threatened sides, let's take Huddersfield v Crystal Palace for example, you'd expect quite a tight, cagey match. But we don't know. Maybe there could be an early goal in that game that really opens up the game, and it could be quite high scoring. The point I'm making there, I do feel it's quite tricky to predict, and of course, FPL being a prediction game, that makes it quite tough for managers to know where to base their players. I think if you have a player in your team, and I'll give you a couple of examples, I've got a couple of cheap bench players. I've got MacArthur from Palace and Joe Allen from Stoke, who drip feed me 2 points every week, probably at best, and very little else. There could be argument there for maybe trading them for a more interesting player, maybe a Shaqiri or a Zaha. My view is to keep them. If you've got a player that is playing in game week 31, you need to keep them in your team. I think this game week is about riding it out. It's not about getting huge gains. It's about damage limitation. It's about getting through an unusual and quite unique set of fairly poor fixtures and getting out the other side ready for the more lucrative game weeks as we run into the end of the season, where all the big teams are back, all our favourite regular fantasy players are back involved, plus we've got the double game weeks. So I don't think you should be chasing points this week. I think if you do score big, it'll be down to luck rather than skill, and I mean that with respect to people who do end up scoring really highly. That's not a criticism. And the way you spread that luck is by having as most players as you can without incurring a hit to start with. So in my case, I will be a bit concerned that I don't have room for people like Zaha or maybe Stanislas or Shaqiri, but you never know. Joe Allen or MacArthur may chip in with a goal and get me a number of points, which will end up being quite valuable to me. If we analyse just some of the games, just finally, I think looking at the league table is key. So for example, if you look at Stoke, they're right down at the bottom. The next couple of games are Arsenal and Spurs. So they're going into that Everton game thinking, come on guys, we need to really win this match. They've been very hard to beat and very tight under Lambert, so maybe that could lead to quite a low-scoring game. Everton likewise have done quite poorly on the road. You flip that round in the Everton dressing room and they're saying, come on guys, our track record away from home is terrible. We need to pull our socks up and try and get a result. And Stoke, team in the bottom two, looks like a really winnable option for them. So, tricky there to predict that one. We would assume that Bournemouth will beat West Brom. However, look at the away table. West Brom have only conceded 23 away from home. And to put that in context, that is a better goals conceded record in away matches than Liverpool, Arsenal and Leicester. So West Brom are no pushovers away from home. Their problem this season has really been that they can't score at the other end. So in terms of getting a Bournemouth attacking player, that adds weight to maybe leaning towards a defender. Likewise, so does the fact that rotation there at Bournemouth is really quite a problem. I think quite a few people were surprised to see Mousset start last weekend instead of King. King, of course, I personally backed in a couple of videos ago. I think he's a great player for fantasy, but we're not sure if he's going to play. Jermaine Defoe's back from injury, so does that prevent Callum Wilson getting a full game? There's a few potholes there that we don't want to trip up in, so be careful with that one. The Huddersfield and Palace game really does interest me because when you look at the table, if Huddersfield win, it puts them 7 points clear of the relegation zone. That's amazing. If Palace win, it gets them out of the relegation zone. So there's big incentives for both teams. There's also big incentives for both teams not to lose. So that makes it really quite hard to call. But it does also make it, for these guys, it doesn't feel like it to us, the neutrals or the fans of the bigger clubs in the league. But this is a cup final sized game for both these teams. This is a big match in the context of their season. So big games call for big players. So does that mean Mooney is star man for Huddersfield? Does it mean Zaha, star man for Palace? Or does it mean a player that's flying under the radar that I've spotted is a £9 million signing that came in January? He scored 14 goals in 25 games this season in the Danish Premier League, and I thought he played really well in the Chelsea game, so lucky not to score. He's played 90 minutes in each of the last 4 games, and he's available at a really cheap price. He's around the 5.5 mark. A guy up front for Palace called Sorloth could be a real differential for you. He's going to be a guy that's been brought in clearly with the brief to come and keep us in the Premier League. Benteke isn't firing. Get yourself in the team and get us some goals. He's a young guy. He's really going to want to prove himself, and what a great opportunity. He's an unknown in our league, so sometimes that leads to defenders not quite knowing a player's game. So if you want to gamble insofar as he's not proven himself quite yet in the Prem, nobody else has got this guy in their team, and he's playing regularly, he could be the guy that could fire you up the table this week. I think one last thing, obviously, we need to talk about is captains. I think it's a no-brainer, I'm afraid, for Mr. Salah. I think it's probably too risky to pick anybody else. You may want to go for Firmino, but given Salah's form and his one-man quest to be the top-scoring player of all time in the FPL, I'd probably pick him this week. So don't drive yourselves too mad with picking the players this week. Keep it simple. Pick the players that are definitely going to play. 2 points might be more valuable to you than no points at all, and it's definitely more valuable than players getting minus for doing too many points hits. So have a good game week, and I'll see you next time round. Thank you for all your support.